Joining us again today on another wrestling podcast to talk about House of Hardcore and a whole lot more is the voice of HOH, Vic Travagliante. Welcome back, Vic. How's everything?
Good, Steve. Glad to be back. Thanks for making time for me to be on your program.
That's right. Now, we're going to get into it in a little bit. Creative Pro presents House of Hardcore 12 at the Elm Course Center in Corona, New York, and Crunch Fitness presents House of Hardcore 13 at the 2300 Arena, the former ECW Arena. But before we get into that, there's a lot of matches happening on both days. People out there who may have not heard from you before may not know if you could tell them a little bit about how you got into wrestling, how you got into the business, and, maybe why House of Hardcore.
Sure. The three-part question, I'll start with the first part about getting into, I guess, who's in the business was a fan before they got into the business and the crazy world of wrestling, as I've been told by many people, some who you've had on this program. And the earliest memory I have is, I was watching wrestling with my uncle and my brothers and my dad, and that goes back to the early 90s, Hulkamania, the Ultimate Warrior. I had the Wrestling Buddies, the action figures, and the thing that really hooked me as a fan from my earliest memory of wanting to get into wrestling was back in the early 90s, a wrestler by the name of Bret Hitman Hart, who it's very nice to hear he is having a good recovery from his cancer, from his post-surgery. He was a world heavyweight champion in the WWF at the time. He was wrestling that night, Mr. Hughes. They kind of put a date on this event, and it was at the Richfield Coliseum, just south of Cleveland, Ohio. And Bret Hart usually would get out of the ring and hand a young fan his pair of pink sunglasses, and on that night, he gave me those pink sunglasses. And I've never told him that. I've met him a couple of times, but I always seem to forget to bring this story up to him. But he gave me those pink sunglasses. I still have them. They're in a shadow box, actually, in the basement of my new house in Cleveland. And that was the moment that really clicked for me that I wanted to be in wrestling. That's as far back as I can really remember that it really finally grabbed hold of me. And obviously during the Attitude Era and things like that, when I was the 13-year-old, the adolescents rebel against everybody, and there was that huge boom period in wrestling, which hooked me even more. So that kind of takes me back to my fandom in getting started. And really I got started in wrestling because when I got out of college, I've had the very lucky career of being able to do many different things at a very high level, and have been very lucky to do it at such a quick time or a quick pace in the time of my life when I got out of college. And I had done some things in Major League Baseball and some things affiliated with the Cincinnati Reds. And I sent basically just a shoot email, shot a guy an email out of the blue that was with Prime Wrestling, which formerly was known as PWO, which before that was known as Cleveland All-Pro. And they had TV on Sports Time Ohio, nationwide, obviously more in the state of Ohio. And he brought me in, and they liked what I did as far as a backstage interviewer, because it was something that was professional and polished, and gave them a little, notch in their belt to have someone that had the resume that I had. And really that resume is what catapulted me to really want to do wrestling. And I knew that I would never be a professional wrestler. I knew that I didn't have many connections in wrestling, and that I would have to make connections elsewhere. And by doing that, I would have to achieve success outside of the quote-unquote wrestling market in the NFL, in broadcasting, in baseball, things like that, which I have. And I've done, CBS Broadcasting, the biggest broadcasting company, I think, in America, the NFL, more notably the Cleveland Browns, the baseball that we've already talked about, covering the Summer Olympics, things like that. And that made me a little more marketable to wrestling. And I've done some shows, AIW in Cleveland, Ring of Honor I've been a part of, Resistance Pro in Chicago, which was Billy Corgan's old promotion before he went to Impact. I've done those. And that brought me to House of Hardcore, which is the third part of your opening question. I started with House of Hardcore and have been with House of Hardcore since day one, so I'm deeply rooted in the company. And that started when I went on a trip with the Rhino to Tommy Dreamer's house, and he basically told me the day of that first show, Steve, if you remember, in October, it was at the
Of course, yeah.
Civic Center. Yeah, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm going to have you call the show." I had no idea that was the morning of. And ever since then, there's only been two guys to appear on every single HOH live event. It's me and Tommy Dreamer. I hosted HOH TV on the Fight Network. I called all those matches. So it's kind of funny and ironic that if you would have told me 15 years ago, Steve, that this would have happened, when I was in high school, I would have called you a liar, because HOH is fun for me, and why I like being a part of it is through the beginning up until now, you can talk about guys like the Dudley Boys, who are back in the WWE, as we all know. Rhino, Tommy Dreamer, who we've talked about, working with a guy like Danny Doring, Mil Mascaris, Terry Funk, all these names, X-Pac, Lance Storm, the list goes on. And they were the guys, and I think, Steve, you and I are about the same age.
Yep.
Those were the guys that I was watching on my television. Those were the guys that were the reason I was ordering pay-per-views with friends, or as a kid wrestling with action figures. And now I'm getting to share a locker room with them. I'm sharing a car with them. I'm sharing a hotel room with them or dinner with them, and it's surreal. And it means a lot to me to be a part of House of Hardcore. It means a lot to me that Tommy Dreamer has entrusted me to be the voice of his company. Because whether I like it or not, I get compared to Joey Styles. Because Joey Styles was the voice of ECW. And in the beginning, everyone thought Tommy and HOH was, maybe the rebirth of ECW. It's grown into its own thing in a different direction. But Tommy entrusted me and worked me through all those battles on how to get better. So I'm deeply rooted in House of Hardcore, and that's kind of my story in a 7-minute answer to those three questions, which are great questions. I could probably talk about a half hour for them, but that's I guess, in a nutshell.
Sure, definitely. And now, I always like to ask people certain questions, especially being in the business, because a lot of fans out there have their own opinion about certain things, what they love or what they hate. But personally, for you, being ingrained in what you do, what do you really hate about wrestling? Is there one thing that bothers you today?
There's so many things to love about professional wrestling. I guess the one thing that I've grown to hate, and I haven't been in wrestling a long time, but the one thing I've grown to hate is the 4-letter F word, and that's fake. And it didn't really click to me until I started seeing social media memes with Chris Jericho. I don't know if you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never taken a bump in the ring. I've never been slammed. I've never been hit with a steel chair. I've never been punched. I've never been chopped or kicked. So in that essence, I'm not describing that. But Chris talks about something and it really hit home with me. And you know what? I thought about it, and I really hate the word fake. And when it comes to wrestling, he talks about there's nothing fake about being slammed. There's nothing fake about getting hit with a steel chair. Now, I can't relate to that aspect, but when people ask me, why would you leave a big money-making job like CBS Broadcasting? Why would you leave a job like the Cleveland Browns, and the job you had only 32 people in the country could have, so there's 31 other people and you had one specific job? Why would you give that up for something that's fake? And that really now irks me when people ask me that or say it's fake. Yes, it's predetermined, but I just talked about giving up that job, Steve, right?
Yeah.
There was nothing fake about me having to have a discussion with my wife and say, hey, we're going to go from an income of X to an income of 0 because I'm going to pursue a dream. There's nothing fake about making that type of life-altering decision. There's nothing fake about having a brand-new dream home and a son who at that point was 6 months old and realizing you're losing half of your income. There's nothing fake about any of that. That's as real as it gets, dude.
Yeah.
And that's why I hate when people say, oh, it's fake. I mentioned those guys. Tommy Dreamer is a very close friend of mine now. I've stayed at Tommy's house. Johnny Gargano, who's on NXT, is one of my best friends in the world. Rhino is the godfather to my son, as a matter of fact. Bull Dempsey, who's Bull James, is becoming a closer friend. Danny Doring has become a close friend. And, the list goes on and on. I mean, Terry Funk was playing with my kid a few months ago, just having a great time with him because Terry and I have a rapport. There's nothing fake about those relationships. Those relationships are as real as they get. So the word fake is really what has upset me, and things that I hate in wrestling is when people that don't get it or have their own little preconceived notion come up to me and say, and I still get it now when I do interviews, when I'm doing stuff for like the Browns, or someone wants me to be on about the Cavs. I heard you left for, wrestling. Why would you leave for something fake? There's nothing fake about the emotion that gets drawn during a show from a live crowd. I love the crowds in New York. I love the crowds in Philly. I love the crowd in Toronto. And even I, as an announcer, if you go back and watch the clip of the Hardy Boys versus the Young Bucks, there's a huge sequence at the end of the match where there's a twist of fate by the Young Bucks on Jeff Hardy and the Swanton Bomb, and the Hardys pick out of their own moves, and the crowd's just so energetic, and I'm feeding off that. I can only imagine what they're feeling,
Sure, yeah.
in the ring. There's nothing fake about that. So to kind of wrap this up, because again, I could probably go on for about an hour on how upset I get when I hear that word. That four-letter F word is probably the thing I hate most in wrestling.
Sure, no, yeah. Well, it's great to hear, from what other people are thinking about it. But I know, the main reason why we're here, we want to get right into House of Hardcore. Now there's two of them coming up. At House of Hardcore 12, there's a bunch of matches that stand out. But if we could pick your brain just about a few of them,
Sure.
one of the matches happening is the Dream Match main event with Rob Van Dam versus Chris Hero. What are your thoughts about these two facing off?
I love Chris Hero. I've worked with him a lot. Chris, I say it on commentary. I'll say it on commentary again. I'll say it to you right now. Chris is unique. Chris is very unique. Chris is a big guy in stature. I mean, he's like 6'5", 6'6". I mean, I'm 6'4". He's got a few inches on me, and he's as strong and hits as hard as a heavyweight. But he does things in the ring and is as agile as a cruiserweight. I mean, he really is a unique athlete. And to have him going up against Rob Van Dam, to my knowledge, it's the first time they've ever met in a ring, one-on-one. So that makes it special. To have Chris step in the ring with a guy like Rob Van Dam, who's a unique athlete in himself, it's just pure magic. And this match sells itself. This match sells the show. People are going to come just to see this match. And there's a huge card, a great card. You can find it at houseofhardcore.net for that show in Queens on April 15th, which is tax day, so hopefully you get your taxes done before then. But it's going to be awesome, man. I personally am looking forward to this match because, one, I've never met Rob Van Dam. I've never worked with Rob Van Dam. I'm excited to now put a feather in my cap saying I've called an RVD match, and this goes back to what we talked about 10 minutes ago. Those guys I watched on TV, why it's special to me, because if you would have told me 15 years ago that the whole effing show and I would be working together and sharing a locker room, I would have called you crazy. So this match means a lot, not just to me, but I think to the two men that are going to step into the ring and to the crowd that's going to show up at the Elmcore Center.
Sure. Now, there's tons of matches happening on there, and we can go on and on about them, but I want to pick out another match that that should get probably a lot more attention, especially these two women. This match coming up. These two women have been pretty much everywhere right now. Deonna Purrazzo versus Thea Trinidad. What are your thoughts on Deonna, who's pretty much been all over the place as of late, from TNA to NXT, and also former TNA knockout Thea Trinidad? I think these women definitely need the spotlight. And what do you think is so special about this match happening at House of Hardcore 12?
I think both of those young ladies and those young athletes are going to have a nice platform to showcase what they do and what they do well. And for Deonna, I mean, you ran it through. You're talking about NXT. She was on Tough Enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's great exposure. Being in a bunch of different promotions all over the place, this is time for her to, again, show that the lights aren't too bright. And I think she'll step up to it. And for Thea Trinidad, she's a unique story, man. I get kind of speechless trying to talk about her because she's an amazing person. We've had great conversations in the back. She probably doesn't remember them because so many people talk to her on a daily basis, but, I do. And she's somebody who got into wrestling and stayed in wrestling because of the loss of her father. And I'm pretty sure you know the story, Steve. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people know the story. Her father was tragically lost in 9/11 in New York. And so to have her live her dream through and for her family and her father to have passed away tragically how he did speaks volumes for her as the individual, not her as the performer, her as the individual. And to see her go in there and to hear stories and hear people talk about her, and then to meet her on how she has worked on getting better and how she puts her heart into everything. Her versus Jade at the last House of Hardcore show that we had in Queens was an awesome match. And no one got up. You didn't see people on their cell phones, and that I think is so disrespectful to the talent, man or woman, when people are on their phones or taking selfies of each other. People were locked on that match inside the ring. So I'm excited to see what these two ladies do in Queens, and they get that chance to have that blank canvas and have a platform like House of Hardcore. And I think both will showcase their abilities, both will shine, and that may be one of the more talked about matches when April 15th wraps up and we move on to April 16th on our way back to South Philly.
That's right. So House of Hardcore 12 once again is going to be at the Elm Course Center in Corona, New York. But if we, there's tons of matches happening there. Everybody, make sure you check out houseofhardcore.net for the full lineup. But if we can move right into House of Hardcore 13 happening at the old ECW arena, the 2300 arena in Philadelphia. One match I want to bring up, which is kind of unique. Teacher versus student. Bull James versus Billy Gunn. Former NXT student versus former NXT trainer. What do you think the fans can expect from this one? Because not too many times you get to see a teacher versus a student.
No, and I think everyone can relate to that, Steve. Everyone relates to that time where they've been challenged by their coach or their mentor or their parent, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is a very relatable match for fans. And when you get a chance to see somebody, again, same thing that you said for RVD when it comes to Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. He's in my top 5. I'm excited to share a locker room with him. I'm excited to call a match with him. I hope I get a few minutes to talk to him. When you have this sort of match, and it goes for the same thing with the night before, because the night before in Queens, Billy Gunn will actually be taking on Sami Callihan, student versus teacher. And my answer relates to both of those questions. You have guys in Sami Callihan and Bull Dempsey, Steve, that have left NXT. They were a step away from their ultimate goal, and they're out to prove that their previous employer was wrong, that they can go, and they want to prove it to the guy that helped train them in Billy Gunn. And at the same time, Billy Gunn, I believe, is looking at it as this is the new generation of wrestler. I've trained these guys, but I'm out to, as much as they want to prove to me how good they are, I need to prove to them and to the fans that come to these shows that I'm as good as I ever was. So it has a lot to do with respect, but it also has a lot to do with those individuals wanting to prove something to their opponent, themselves, and the fans. Great matches, both nights, teacher versus student. Actually, in the new House of Hardcore update, which come out every Wednesday, the new one will be available on Wednesday afternoon. One of the earlier ones we did, I think HOH Update 1 for these shows, you heard from Bull Dempsey. And then the second one, you heard from Billy Gunn towards Sami Callihan. So these three guys, they do have that path that intertwines, and this is a chance for people to see these three individuals get in the ring on those separate nights and finally get to prove themselves, as I said, to themselves, to each other, and then to the fans.
Well, it's definitely a unique match coming up. The fans are going to be in store for one heck of a match with these two, but I want to bring up these two next guys who a lot of people know. Brian Cage versus Sami Callihan. Cage known for his work in PWG. Callihan straight off of NXT. Two of probably the best wrestlers in the world. What are your thoughts about these two clashing at House of Hardcore 13?
I got to do a lot of research on Brian Cage. I don't know much about him. I know he looks like $1 million. He's big. He's powerful. I'm sure he's got a nasty, mean streak in him. But I got to do a little bit more research on him. But I know about Sami Callihan. Sami Callihan at House of Hardcore has taken on MVP and Rhino. And that match against Rhino, to me, is maybe the best match I've ever called in wrestling. It's one of my favorite matches to rewatch. And Sami Callihan is a different type of intense when he gets in the ring. The stretch muffler, the way he throws his body around, the way he's able to use different parts of the ring to his advantage, like the ring ropes, and get a little extra torque on a splash. This is very interesting to me because I know about Sammy. I don't know much about Brian. And I'm interested to see Brian Cage step in the ring and see really what he can do, because Sami Callihan isn't a pushover. Sami Callihan has hurt people all over the world. You mentioned going to NXT. You know, he's coming out. He, as I just said, has a lot to prove to himself, to his opponents, and to the fans. So this match is unique to me, and I'm looking forward to sitting there and having the best seat in the house.
Well, Vic, there's so many matches happening on both of these nights. For any fan out there right now where they think they could probably watch it online or on TV or whatnot, just let them know where can the fans watch the shows, or where can they catch up with HOH?
This is the big thing here, Steve. These shows will not be on internet pay-per-view.
Okay.
We've done the internet pay-per-views in the past. Everyone's been asking. Social media has been a buzz about it. There is no internet pay-per-view. If you're in the New York area in Queens, if you're in Queens and in New York, you want to get down to Philly, if you're in Philly and you want to make your way to Queens, I'm telling you right now, go to houseofhardcore.net and you have to purchase a ticket. It's the only way you're going to see them until the DVDs and the Blu-rays come out. Awesome. So if you want to see this action, you got to be there live. And that's the best way to experience it. And you've talked about some of the matches. The GHC tag team titles are going to be on the line, a rare opportunity to see the most prestigious tag team titles in Japan defended here in the States. It happens both nights. And along with the surprises, I mean, the thing that's also cool about House of Hardcore, Steve, that anything can happen. Alberto Del Rio shows up. Rey Mysterio shows up. The Dudley Boys show up. Unannounced TNA title matches. The list goes on. And the moments you've seen, Terry Funk and Tommy teaming for the last time, Mil Mascaras performing in the United States, Beulah's last stand, Tracy Brooks saying goodbye, the Hall of Fame enshrinement of Dean Linkle and Eddie Guerrero, and I'm sure I'm forgetting about something that happened. All these huge moments, and the way the last show ended, the way House of Hardcore 11 ended, with the ECW originals, Sabu, Tommy Dreamer, Sandman, Tajiri standing in the ring, striking their iconic poses. You're not going to get that anywhere. That's it. That's, once in a lifetime type stuff. You don't want to miss these events. Every event has been bigger than the last. They'll continue to be bigger than the last. Tommy has guaranteed you the surprises. The history is going to be made. So if you want to see these shows, there's really only one way to see them, and that's live, because they're not going to be offered on internet pay-per-view. You got to be in the Elmcore Center, or you got to be in the 2300 Arena. And before the doors open for the show in Philly on April 16th, huge wrestling convention, Steve, that's going to take place that we're honored to be a part of, with a lot of the names that are on the House of Hardcore show, along with guys like the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Lex Luger. I mean, the list goes on and on. Kurt Angle, that are going to be a part of Collectors Fest. So a huge wrestling comic book day on that Saturday in Philly. I hope everyone comes out. I'm looking forward to seeing all the fans from New York, from Philly, and all over the place.
Well, Vic, it's always a pleasure talking with you. For everybody out there, please head on over to houseofhardcore.net. 2 amazing nights, April 15th and April 16th. Vic, have a great time, man, and I hope all the fans out there listen that you can't watch this online. You have to be there live, so buy your tickets today.
And I will throw out one little other disclaimer, Steve, if I have the time. Be on the lookout, wrestling fans, because I believe that Tommy Dreamer is going to be announcing a couple more House of Hardcore shows for the 2016 calendar year. Some of that news should be coming out very soon, and we also have a show coming up in May for you fans in the New York and even the Philly area. In Canada, Ontario, Niagara Falls, part of the Mindy O experience. We're going to be there on May the 7th. And so hopefully a lot of fans make their way up to Toronto. Last time we were in Toronto, we set an all-time attendance record. We're open to do the same, and you can also find those matches along with ticket information for all 3 shows. Again, houseofhardcore.net.